Hello, welcome back to Through the Trapdoor. I'm Emily.
And I'm Katie.
And this is our podcast where we read you Harry Potter fan fiction.
That's what we do.
If there's dramatic noises that you can hear in the background, Ben is watching a loud movie in the basement.
Yes, so we can hear it, which means you can probably hear it.
Yeah, so if there's like dramatic music or booming noises, it's just Ben watching a movie in the background. Don't worry.
Yes.
We're not being dramatically attacked.
So we are not in a war zone.
We're good. Anything fun you want to talk about?
Well, we just had really yummy cake.
Oh my god, it was such good cake.
So, I brought us these little mini bunt cakes from this place called Nothing But Bunt Cakes, which is a chain. So you could have one where you live if you were in the U.S. But I brought us confetti and white chocolate raspberry.
Oh, so good.
So good. And we ate almost all of them.
Yeah.
We ate probably a whole and a half. Mm-hmm. And then I went to go, which one do you want to keep? That one. And I pointed to the white chocolate raspberry, because obviously.
Yep.
She ate more of that one. I ate more of the confetti.
Yep.
Which is us in a nutshell.
Yes, it really is.
But they were so good.
So good. I highly recommend them if you have one near you.
Yeah, look them up. They are so good. They're very light, and it's a really nice cream cheese buttercream frosting.
Very spongy cake.
Ugh. They're so good.
Now that we've talked about cake for 5 minutes. I don't think I really have any other announcements.
No. Nothing else really new or exciting.
Oh, I think that we've hit 5,000 downloads.
Oh, that is so exciting!
So, thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, peoples.
Lisa, if you're listening, I know I never emailed you back. I'm sorry. Being pregnant is hard.
And I suck at emailing people.
Like,
She's in charge of it.
Yeah, don't think it's just you. I only made out half of my thank you cards before I gave up and laid on the couch and said, people understand. And that's where I left that.
Yeah. So, please, we still love you.
Yeah, please don't be offended. I meant to email you back, but...
We're the worst.
Yeah. Let's keep reading chapter 9.
Yeah.
Is it just me, or is she being unusually whiny? Seriously asked. She's just tired, James replied, resuming the bouncing of his ball. So what are you going to talk to her about? I have no idea, James replied.
James!
Then why did you ask to talk to her? Sirius demanded.
That's how I'm feeling, Sirius.
Good question. Are you finally going to put yourself out of your misery then? Sirius persisted, grabbing a new drumstick. I don't know. Are you going to tell her then? Tell her what? Tell her that you can't live without her, Sirius cried dramatically. That you can't breathe without her, can't eat without her, can't sleep without her, can't change your knickers without her.
Oh, damn.
Oh, shove it, Sirius, James said, punching his best friend on the shoulder. Well, you're not denying it. Bugger off, I'm going to talk to her. Sirius began humming a funeral march as James walked out of the kitchen. I'm going to hurt you one of these days, Padfoot. Lily waited impatiently outside of her room for James, playing with a lock of her hair. She was pacing, back and forth, back and forth. It was one of her more annoying nervous habits. She heard footsteps approaching and slowed her pace a bit. When she saw James, she stopped altogether and looked at him for a moment. James, what did you... But he didn't give her a chance to finish. Instead, he wrapped his arms tightly around her waist, pulled her into him, and kissed her. Lily closed her eyes and kissed him back, letting her arms wrap themselves around his neck. Lily had been very tired, but after a kiss like this, she really wasn't likely to sleep for hours. She broke the kiss and stepped away. What the hell was that about? She demanded. But James didn't reply. He kissed her again. Lily tried to break away several times to ask him what he was doing, but he ignored her protests and kissed her until her head started spinning and her knees turned to jelly. I'm confused why she doesn't know what's happening here.
It's pretty clear what's happening here.
He's obviously trying to make out with your face.
Like, clearly he's in love with you, and he doesn't have words, so he's using actions, which is making out with your face.
Yeah.
Lily.
Clearly, we understand what's happening. Lily, shocking both herself and James, kissed him back, pulling his body as close to hers as she could until their hearts were beating almost next to each other. How long the kiss lasted after that, Lily didn't know. Hours? Days? Did it matter? James kissed her again, slowly, and brought his lips away from hers gently. Lily didn't open her eyes, didn't move, didn't speak. She just stood there, breathing, as James rested his forehead against hers. She couldn't remember ever holding someone so tightly. "Well, we're making progress," James whispered. Lily felt his lips moving against her cheek, and a hot, achy feeling swelled inside of her. "Progress," Lily echoed, trailing a line of kisses from his cheek to the corner of his mouth. James pulled away just as she was about to kiss him, and her lips landed on his chin.
Rude.
She pulled her head back, disappointed, and looked up at him, feeling sulky. James was grinning ear to ear. "Ah," he said triumphantly, kissing her on the nose. "Aha, what?" Lily asked, still eyeing his lips. "Aha," James replied, kissing her forehead. "You like it when I kiss you." Lily's face flushed violently. "Of course I do," she whispered as he kissed her on both cheeks. "Why do you think I've been kissing you back?" James grinned and kissed her on the chin. "I don't know," he said, looking into Lily's eyes. "Sometimes you're difficult about it." "Difficult how?" Lily asked, her mind still blurry, wondering why anybody would be difficult about kissing him. He was very good at it. His lips were extremely soft. They were driving her crazy. "I seem to remember," James began, interrupting Lily's rather crazed train of thought, "someone slapped me quite a bit last year over a few harmless kisses." Lily narrowed her eyes at James's, which were taunting her, and had her mouth open to defend herself before she saw the evident hurt behind James's teasing expression. "Oh," she whispered, before pulling him into a very tight hug. "I'm sorry, I don't know. I was 15 then. I didn't know what to do. She trailed off, leaning back so that she could look into his eyes. I was mad at you. I wasn't expecting it all. I was embarrassed, James." "What about this year, then?" James asked, looking hurt. "When Remus and Sirius caught us kissing, you slapped me then, too." Lily bit her lip guiltily. "I've been a bit horrible, haven't I?" "No, Lily, not at all. It's just that—" "No, but it is that, James," Lily argued. "I've been awful, and you haven't said a word about it. And I don't know why you've even put up with me." "Oh, come off it, Lily. I'm sorry, James," she interrupted. "It's just, she sighed. "You've never seemed very serious about any of it. You'd laugh at me before you kissed me, or laugh at me afterwards, or pretend that the whole thing had been some big joke, or just kiss me to shut me up, or—" She shook her head. "I could never really tell if you felt anything about me or if you were just having fun." James kissed her again, unexpectedly, and Lily's heart fluttered. "I definitely feel something for you, Lily." "Well then," Lily said, feeling a small pang of fear in her gut. She had not expected this. "This changes things a bit." James kissed her in agreement.
Well, now they've at least finally admitted it.
I know, now they're both on the same page, and they're not slapping each other while kissing.
Which is great. Great progress.
You've made such great progress today. Melody floated around the ballroom like a princess, dancing with every eligible bachelor in sight. Her uncle was very pleased. She had really blossomed over these last few months. She carried herself elegantly, and she was becoming a master at small talk. She had caught the eye of several very prestigious wizards, and within a few years would marry and bring the family a much-needed infusion of money. The Caldwell fortune was dwindling dangerously, and there was no one else left to turn to.
That's a lot of pressure to put on a 16-year-old.
I feel like he probably hasn't told her.
Yeah, but bringing her to balls and stuff, I would almost assume, he is trying to marry her off to some rich guy.
Yeah. But I feel like she probably doesn't see it as that. She probably, like...
Oh, yeah, she sees it as, like, these lavish parties, and her
Yeah.
uncle's just doting on her.
Yep. I feel like that's exactly how she is, like, seeing it right now and, like, not realized that, oh.
Yeah, my rich uncle is trying to marry me off so we get more money.
Mm-hmm. Hans only wished that the Potters would come to more of these retreats. They were always invited, of course, but their fortune rivaled even that of the Malfoys. They were proven descendants of Godric Gryffindor, and Mr. Potter was the Minister of Magic. They had a son about Melody's age, Hans knew, and he would be a perfect match for her. But alas, it was not to be. Instead, she was left to the selection of unworthy wizards, including a particularly dislikable American one whom Hans did not quite trust. Melody was infatuated with someone, he could tell, he just didn't know who. It was nobody here, a rather unfortunate circumstance, but Hans was half tempted to ask his niece who it was. For all he knew, it could have been the young Potter boy. He did go to Hogwarts after all, didn't he? Ah, well, maybe Hans would have Catalina go through Melody's things later to see if she had been receiving letters from any notable young wizard. Lily and James had decided to go for a walk through the indoor gardens to talk. Unfortunately, they weren't doing much talking. They were walking side by side in silence. Lily playing absent-mindedly with her necklace, raking her mind desperately for something to say. "What do you want from me, James?" she asked suddenly, stopping and turning to him. "Want from you?" James repeated, sounding confused. "Lily, I don't want anything from you. I just want to be around you and not have you slap me." "Is that all?" Lily persisted. Yes, James insisted, looking very confused. "Are you sure, James? Are you sure? Because the way you've been kissing me..." James blinked and shook his head at her. "What about the way you've been kissing me back?" he demanded softly, narrowing his eyes at her. "What about that?" Lily blinked, but continued to stare straight ahead. I can't do what you want me to, James." "Oh, bugger, Sirius was right," James cried, sitting down on the ground. "About what?" Lily asked, finally laying her gaze on him. "About everything," James mumbled, looking very put out. "Sirius is always right." "What was it this time?" she prodded. "Nothing," James said, shaking his head. "Nothing." Lily sighed and sat down beside him. "Look, James, I want to be your friend." "And? Is that all you want to be? Is that it?" he asked bitterly. Yes, no, I don't know." "Well, that's just dandy. Thanks for being so specific, Lil." "James!" "What?" "Oh, for heaven's sakes, it's not like that." "Well, it is. And it isn't. It's..." She sighed and stared at the ground for a moment, attempting to collect her thoughts. "I like you, James," she declared finally. "But?" James asked, sounding bored. "No but. I like you. And..." she shrugged. "That's all. Nothing more, nothing less." "Ah," James replied after a moment. "Lovely. Well, thanks for telling me, Lily. That's really great. Of course, I wouldn't have cared to know when I was carrying on and making a fool out of myself back there, but you didn't even care. Thanks a lot." "James!" Lily cried as he stood and began stalking away. "It's not like that at all." "Well, then, what is it like, huh?" "It's like when you kiss me, you want commitment, I guess. Like you want a commitment I'm not ready for. I'm only 16, James. I feel like you want me to decide what to do with my entire future. Like I have to decide right now whether or not I want you to be a part of my future." James stared at her. "And you don't think you want me to be in your future? Is that what you're saying?" "No, James, I don't know. I'm scared. Don't you get it? The truth is, I don't know what I feel about you. Just that I've never felt anything like it before, and it's scary as hell." "Well, 2 steps forward, 5 steps back," James shrugged. "It could be worse." Lily put her head on his shoulder. "I'm sorry I can't be perfect for you, James. You're still here, aren't you?" he asked, slipping his arm around her and staring straight ahead. feeling both like he'd lost and gained something. Yeah, Lily whispered, picking up a lock of her hair and playing with it. I am. Melody danced with Luke many times. He was the only person here that she really felt comfortable with. He was still something of a stranger, of course, and most definitely not a marauder. But still, he was a friend or something like that, and nice to talk to. He was also a good excuse to get away from the Malfoys. Her uncle had encouraged her to talk to them, but she didn't like the way Lucius sneered at her, or his uncle, Lucifer, a good 10 years older than both of them at least, kept staring at her. Come, Luke said in the middle of the party, let's get away from here. I want to show you something. Melody, glad for an excuse to get away for a minute, followed him eagerly out of the ballroom and into the front hall, where a sparse number of witches and wizards had decided to congregate, and Severus Snape could be seen, distinctly enough, snogging with Narcissa behind a tapestry. Come on, Locke insisted, tugging at Melody's hand, pulling her towards a window that was hidden behind a tapestry. What did you want to show me? Melody asked, but the words had barely had time to escape her lips before Luke swooped down and kissed her. Melody was too shocked and disgusted for a moment to do anything. Instead, she concentrated on the horrible feeling of one of his cold hands on her neck. Then she recovered her wits and shoved him away with force. Ew, she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand, feeling very stupid. What gave you the idea you could do that? She demanded. You've been dancing with me all night, haven't you? Luke demanded, looking almost hurt. Well, yes, but that doesn't mean I want to have a snog session with you. You're practically the only person my age around here. Who do you think I want to dance with? Colonel Fartstein? She demanded. He looked even older than Dumbledore. Luke considered this for a moment. Well, no, he conceded. But if you didn't want to kiss me, then what'd you get all dressed up for? Just to get dressed up? Actually, yes, Melody replied. I like dressing up, thank you.
Rude.
Yes.
Very presumptive.
Like, what? Of course she just likes getting dressed up.
She's a girl.
Also, there's a party.
Like,
I would expect that at a party you would get dressed up.
Like, her rich uncle was like, you got an hour to get ready. And she's like, oh, I have to be beautiful. Like, come on.
Crazy person.
Mm-hmm.
She shook her head at him. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe I have a party to attend. With that, she spun heel and stalked off. She didn't notice the gold chain glittering in Luke's rather cold right hand.
Did that bitch ass steal her necklace?
I think he just stole her necklace.
He stole the key to her wardrobe.
Yep. Oh dear, Mrs. Potter said the next morning when she was joined by her guests for breakfast. It looks like the snow won't be clearing any time soon. She drew back the heavy red curtains in the dining room, and her guests could see that it was snowing heavily outside. This is going to drive me crazy, she said, bringing her hand to her lips nervously. I've got to do something. Lily exchanged a glance with Sirius, who just shrugged, but James sighed loudly and plopped into a chair. You're not going to throw another party, are you, Mum? Well, that depends, Mrs. Potter replied, gazing down the length of the table where James's father sat, reading the morning edition of the Daily Prophet. Christopher, dear. Mr. Potter sighed and looked over the top of his paper. Yes. I was wondering, you've been so busy at the office lately, and while you haven't had time to really see your friends, Mr. Potter sighed again, sounding very much like James. We just had the Blacks and the Lupins over yesterday, he reminded her. Oh, I know, dear, but really, what about all your other friends? When was the last time you really had a party? Uncloaked the ballroom and everything? Lily blinked. Ballroom? This place had a ballroom, too?
Of course it does.
Lily!
It has an indoor garden with all 4 seasons.
Lily. God.
Come on, girl.
Mr. Potter looked at his wife's pleading face and then sighed in resignation. When do you want to have it? Mrs. Potter smiled and squealed like a little girl. Oh, New Year's Eve, I think. It will be marvelous, dear. She swooped down and kissed her husband. Well, I've got a lot of planning to do, and there's so little time. You all just sit down here and have a nice breakfast, and well, if you have any questions, I'm sure James can answer them for you." And Mrs. Potter hurried out of the dining room and disappeared down a hallway. "Dad, not again," James complained as several platters of food suddenly appeared on the dining table. "Not now, James. Remember the last time you let her do this?" "Not now, James." "The house elves were cleaning for a week." "James," Mr. Potter barked. "Sorry," James mumbled and spooned some scrambled eggs onto his plate. "Just saying." Melody gulped nervously and began pacing around her room. How was she going to tell them? How in the world was she ever going to explain this to her uncle? Well, of course, she'd explain it to Catalina first, but oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Her uncle was going to kill her. She knew there'd been something fishy from the start. She knew it, but she was too trusting. That was it. Yes, she was much too trusting. But how to explain it? How? How did she explain? She'd lost it. Okay, well, she hadn't exactly lost it. In fact, she knew exactly where and when it had gone missing, but that's not entirely the point. And now, all of it, well, it was all gone. Except for the small brown bag in the corner of her room that no one touched, that everyone liked to pretend wasn't there, like some sort of dirty family secret, which Melody didn't really appreciate because honestly, it was just... Well, no, that wasn't important right now. Not at all. What was important was figuring out how to tell Catalina. Well, how to tell Catalina that... Tap, tap, tap. "Melody, dear." The heavy doors to Melody's room opened slowly and Catalina entered gracefully. Melody sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at her uncle's mistress miserably. "Why, Melody, whatever is the matter?" Catalina asked, tilting her head with an expression of both curiosity and concern. Melody stared at the floor for a long time. Then, "It's gone," she croaked. "All of it." "Gone? What's gone, Melody? You're not making any sense." "All of it. The dresses, all the shoes, all the clothes, everything. It's gone. He took it all." "What? He? Who he? Took what? What? Melody nodded sadly. "All of it. Except not the jewelry. He didn't find the jewelry." "Who? Melody? Who was it?" Melody looked up at Catalina, her big blue eyes full of hurt, disbelief, shame. "Luke," she replied, softly, still in shock. "He took it all." "Oh, Lily dear, do you have any idea where James is?" Mrs. Potter caught Lily in the hallway in front of the indoor gardens just after breakfast. No," she replied, "not at the moment. He's supposed to meet me here in 10 minutes. "Oh, well, good. Listen, would you be a dear and send him up to see me in the ballroom in half an hour? I need to consult him about the guest list. And Sirius, too, if you see him." Mrs. Potter paused for a moment and looked at Lily, as if considering who she was talking to. "And you should come too, of course. I realize you've never seen the ballroom." She trailed off, a very distracted look in her eyes, as though she were thinking about a million other things. "I'll be sure to do that," Lily assured her, and she nodded and smiled at Lily rather absently. "Well then, half an hour then," she said, nodding and walking off briskly. Lily waited 20 minutes for James, and then when he came, it was with Sirius and a handful of cookies and Lily's little brother. "Can we go see the gardens again?" Dean asked excitedly. "Actually, no. At least not at the moment. James's mom wants him and Sirius to help her with something in the ballroom. Something about a guest list, I think." James groaned. "Oh, great. Well, this way, then. It takes a while to get to the ballroom."
No.
It did. 15 minutes. Nearly, and up more staircases than Lily could count. Was there an end to this place?
No, it's a magic house.
Magic. "This place is really backwards," Sirius commented as they reached the last flight of stairs. "Everyone has to enter by way of the grand staircase so they can be announced properly, but the operating room is a floor below the top of the grand staircase, so they built the staircase so the people could enter properly, but during parties no guests are allowed in the main house, so it's a concealment charm that they use, and the staircase actually leads to the rest of the house, but then there has to be about 10 extra steps for the charm to work, and then another staircase around here somewhere that leads into the gardens, and that's about 40 steps shorter than it should be, so all the rest of the staircase have to be longer to compensate. Isn't it crazy how magic balances itself out?" Lily stared at him. Her head was spinning.
Honestly, same.
What? Sirius laughed. Where in the world did you learn all that? Isn't this supposed to be James's house? It is my house, James clarified. Just because I understand how it works and Sirius doesn't, I understand how it works just fine, Sirius protested. Lily's the one who's confused. I am too, Dean piped up. Why are there so many staircases? James sighed. It's really not important, he said as they reached the doors to the ballroom. Let's just get this over with, shall we? He suggested and yanked open one of the heavy cherry doors, holding it for the rest of them. And that is the end of this part. That was like utter nonsense that Sirius just said at the end there.
Absolute utter nonsense.
All right. Any fun topics you want to talk about? So in one of the more recent episodes of Potterless,
Yes.
Mike goes on this long kind of tangent rant about Ron in the last movie and book going into the chamber.
Yes.
And about how, you can't just, learn that and, all these things. And then he starts talking about how, Harry's the only one who really understands it and all these things. Do you think that Dumbledore knows Parseltongue?
I don't think he does.
Then how did he know what those memories with the Gaunts were saying? Because I have a theory that Dumbledore may not be able to speak Parseltongue, but he at least learned enough that he could understand Parseltongue.
But who would have taught him Parseltongue? Because somebody would have had to have teach it to him.
I think that there's also, books in Parseltongue. I saw a theory at one time somewhere about Dumbledore having to know some kind of Parseltongue, because how else would he know what's happening in those moments with the Gaunts? Because, the way that we read it in the book makes sense because Harry's there, but, we know that this isn't the first time that Dumbledore has seen these memories. He collected them himself, and if he just, collected them and watched them, he would have no idea what they're saying to each other.
Right, but there was a point in those memories where at least Marvolo switches over from Parseltongue to speaking English because the Ministry Wizard, whose name I can't remember at the moment, does end up speaking to Marvolo about Morphin.
But it's very brief compared to the rest of those particular memories where they're very heavily...
Because he still only speaks to Morphin in Parselmouth. And Morphin, it seems, only can speak Parseltongue.
And Morphin is the one that Dumbledore got the memories from.
Right, while he was in Azkaban.
And, a lot of the really important conversations that they have about what's happening happen in Parseltongue. And Dumbledore would have needed that context.
Right, because Merope also speaks Parseltongue. Mm-hmm. Which proves that even though she was kind of a squib, she definitely still had some magical ability.
Yes. And, I get that, he was there and could see it, and, visually that would help a lot with context. But he would still need to at least understand a good portion of what they were saying.
Right, he would really need to know what they were saying.
And, I get, Harry could have translated and stuff, but it seems like he...
had an idea of what was going on beforehand.
Yeah, he'd watched them, he knew kind of what was happening, and at no point did Harry, translate anything for him that we saw.
Harry just knew what they were saying. I never thought about this.
I feel like it's a thing that a lot of people don't think of, but Dumbledore had to at least understand Parseltongue.
At least have a very rudimentary understanding.
Yeah,
of it.
even if he doesn't understand everything, like it could be like my vague understanding of Spanish where like I can piece things together with context clues.
Right.
So he at least has to understand a little bit of it, which means that you can learn Parseltongue.
Yeah.
Either that or he's also related to Salazar and speaks Parseltongue and just pretends he doesn't.
Right, because the only reason Harry could was because of the piece of Voldemort's soul, which connected him directly to Salazar.
Yes. Because, again, we don't have a ton of history on the Dumbledore family before, their lives in Godric Hollow.
Right, because we don't really know anything about his father or Kendra.
Yeah.
Because Kendra could have easily been related to a Slytherin.
Yep.
Or related to, or a Gaunt, or...
Yep. So, he could potentially speak it. Or he could have learned it somewhere.
Especially since most of the pureblood families are connected in some way.
Yes.
Just like the Peverils and the Potters. But I thought there was a link between the Dumbledores and the Peverils, which would make Harry and Dumbledore mildly related in some way.
I believe so, yes. In any case, it's a very interesting topic of, to some extent, Dumbledore has to at least be able to understand Parseltongue so that he knew what was happening in those scenes. Because there were at least one or two scenes where it was exclusively Parseltongue was spoken.
Right.
And, he has to know at least a little bit.
Right, and I can understand, the reason why Ron could open the Chamber of Secrets was because he's heard Harry say open more than once.
Yes.
Harry had to say it to the faucet so they could get down into the chamber. Harry said it to the locket to open the locket, even though... Did Ron see Harry open the next stage of the chamber, though? Or had the wall already collapsed? And Harry opened that part by himself. I think the wall had already collapsed at that point.
The wall had already collapsed.
I think Lockhart had already taken Ron's wand and backfired the memory charm on himself.
Yes.
But there's at least 2 times that Ron has physically witnessed Harry say open in Parseltongue.
Yes. Plus, Harry does talk in his sleep a lot.
Right. So, and it's, the one phrase that, Ron has heard Harry say often. It's the one phrase that Harry consciously said out loud, willing himself to say it. It's the one thing that he knew consciously that he could say.
Yes.
Where everything else happened unconsciously.
Yes.
So it would make sense that that's something that he said in his sleep.
Mm-hmm. So, I understand Ron and, being able to say that, at least close enough that, he could open the chamber.
Right.
But, yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think it could be a learned skill. Either that or Dumbledore was always a parcel mouth and just never said anything. Which it does. They always say it was a mark of a dark wizard, but in reality it could just be a mark of a powerful wizard.
Exactly.
And let's be honest, Dumbledore was not all sunshine and rainbows.
No, he was not.
He was a better villain than Dumbledore. Than Voldemort.
Yes.
If you really looked at him.
Yeah, no,
everything was for his own gain, even when he made it seem like it wasn't.
Yes. I think he's my favorite type of villain because he's doing things for the greater good, but he goes about it in a very...
It's very self-serving.
Yes. He always has others do the dirty work.
Right. Even when he's sacrificing himself, he's only sacrificing himself so Harry can die at the proper moment.
Yes. Exactly.
And he did leave a child in an abusive home for 11 years without even a peep coming back at him.
All right, any other fun, ranty topics you want to talk about?
No, I think that was good. That was a good one.
We will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us on our journey through the trap door.
Please leave us a review on Facebook or iTunes. It would literally mean the world to us.
It really would.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Through the Trapdoor 16 or on Twitter at The Trapdoor.
And please send us an email at throughthetrapdoor16@gmail.com with any story suggestions. And as always, join us again next Saturday as we travel through the trapdoor.